It's 1999. Russia had just come out of a bloody war with a region south of Russia next to Georgia called Chechnya. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Chechnya declared independence. That didn't sit well with Russia, so just like with the war in Ukraine today, Russia tried to bring the country back under its control by force. The only problem was, there were Chechen rebels in Russia. For years, these rebels would carry out attacks against Russians on their home turf. Chechen fighters had infiltrated the country. They lived like Russians, waiting for the chance to attack. Something had to be done. The Russian President Boris Yeltsin had assured the population that there was going to be peace, but that wasn't enough. The patriotic people of Mother Russia wanted a strong leader, someone who could unite the country, take on Chechnya, and prove Russia's strength. And in the background, a little-known man was hatching a plan to take advantage of this crisis and seize power. A man by the name of Vladimir Putin. September 4th, 1999. A massive explosion rocks a barracks housing Russian soldiers and their families. 64 people, men, women, children, are pulled out of the rubble, dead. The suspects? According to the Russian government, it was Chechen terrorists. September 13th, 9 days later. Everyone is on edge since the last bombing, and residents of an apartment building in Moscow noticed some suspicious activity in the building's lobby and reported to police. The police search the building and find nothing. They leave around 2 a.m. By 5:03 a.m., a bomb in the basement rips the building apart. 121 people die in their sleep. Who was responsible? The Chechens, of course. Within just 12 days, a total of 4 bombs would explode, killing 300 Russian citizens and spreading panic throughout the country. After the First Chechen War, most Russians hated or at least disliked Chechens. Now with 4 Chechen attacks in just 12 days, they were seeing red, and they wanted to see some payback. That is where Putin came in. See, at the time, Vladimir Putin was the Prime Minister of Russia, which is basically the second in command after the actual presidents. And compared to today, barely anyone knew who he was. He was a nobody in the eyes of the public. But he made sure that that was about to change. Within days, Russia launched a full-scale invasion against the Chechen capital, spearheaded by Putin. Putin was Russia's avenger, and in an instant, he became a national hero. Conveniently, he was running for president at the time. In August 1999, Vladimir Putin had only 2% of the country's support for presidents. After the bombings, President Boris Yeltsin suddenly steps down, and by March 2000, Putin seizes the presidential office with 53% of the votes. Putin had given the Russian people what they wanted: revenge and a strong leader. There was only one problem. There were some inconsistencies with the 4 bombings. Most people believed the government story, but a small group of skeptics discovered some holes in the narrative. They could never have imagined where those questions would lead them. You see, aside from the 4 bombs, there was actually a 5th bomb planted in another apartment building. Except this one didn't go off. The residents saw 2 men carrying large bags into the building's basement before speeding away, so thankfully, they called the police immediately. Turns out the bags were actually 3 110-pound bombs wired to a detonator and timer. An FSB explosives expert was called in, and he confirmed their suspicions. The bags contained a powerful explosive known as RDX, and if it went off, it would bring the entire building down. By the afternoon, the news had spread throughout Russia. Prime Minister Putin congratulated the residents for their courage and vigilance. But here's where things get interesting. You see, because the residents had called the cops so quickly, they were actually able to catch the 2 men who planted the explosives in the building. The 2 men carried SFB IDs. The SFB is basically the equivalent of America's FBI. Soon after they were caught, a call from SFB headquarters came through, ordering the police to release them. The next morning, the entire narrative changed. The bags never had any explosives in them, just white sugar. And the 2 men, they were apparently part of a training exercise for the FSB. Something was seriously off. Had the FSB really sacrificed 300 innocent Russians to get Putin into power? That's what many journalists tried to find out. One of them was Alexander Litvinenko, and Alexander was later found dead, poisoned by the Russian government. Even though most people don't want to talk about it, it's an unspoken reality. Vladimir Putin and his friends at the FSB had most likely arranged those bombings to get Putin into power. Under Vladimir Putin, Russia was changed forever, and the FSB, it became one of the most powerful organizations in the entire country. This is the FSB, Putin's eyes and ears, his army of operatives that serve at his beck and call, and what some refer to as Russia's shadow government. At the end of the Cold War, Russia was down on its luck, politically, economically, and financially. Unfortunately, Russia couldn't just apply for a loan or take out a credit card to help improve the economy. And sometimes it can be like that for people too. You can't get a loan because your credit isn't strong enough. And you can't build up your credit because you need a credit card to build up your credit. But to get a credit card, you need good credit. But to have good credit, you need a credit card. Do you see what I am getting at here? This catch-22 didn't seem fair to a group of smart people, so they created Extra. Extra is the world's first ever debit card that lets you build your credit. Yes, that is right, a debit card that builds your credit. It even lets you earn reward points just like a real credit card, but without the credit checks, interests, and the risk of owing money to your bank. Here's how it works. You head to the link below, you sign up and link your bank account. Once you've signed up, you'll get your Extra card in the mail, and whenever you want to buy something, just swipe your Extra card just like you would with any other card, and Extra will spot your purchase. Extra would then auto-pay themselves back the next business day, and at the end of the month, all of those purchases are reported back to the credit bureaus as credit-worthy purchases, building your credit. And you get all of this without having to make a deposit or go through a credit check. So if you want to start building your credit today, pause the video and go to extra.app/JakeTrend with the link below. That's extra.app/JakeTrend with the link below. Thanks to Extra for sponsoring this video. Russia has three main intelligence agencies: the GRU, Russia's military intelligence, the SVR, which is Russia's foreign intelligence and the equivalent of the CIA, and the FSB, which works like America's FBI, except they get to color outside the lines a lot more. The FSB was officially created on April 1995. They mostly worked inside Russia, but although over the years, Putin has given them more and more power to operate internationally, it's no surprise that the FSB is Putin's favorite intelligence agency. They're partly responsible for him becoming president after all. But that's not the only reason why they're his puppets. You see, unlike the GRU and the SVR, the FSB has become an expert in Putin talk. They tell Putin what he wants to hear. When Putin wants to do something crazy and dangerous, they're the ones who volunteer, while everyone else is doing risk analysis. And because there are so many different agencies in Russia vying for Putin's favor, him picking the FSB as his baby has made for some stiff competition, which means the FSB has taken even more risk to maintain Putin's favor. This is Boris Nemtsov, a liberal politician and Vladimir Putin's biggest opposition. Before Putin became president, everyone expected Nemtsov to win the throne. After Putin won, Nemtsov took every opportunity he got to take on the president. He was playing a dangerous game.
Почему они игнорируют мнение народа? Потому что главный пахан Путин рвется к власти. Путин, уходи! Ты не знаешь свой народ! Ты даже не понимаешь, почему мы здесь! Россия будет свободной! Россия! Путин вор! Путин вор! Путин вор! Путин вор! Россия без Путина! Россия без...
But he never imagined what the government would do to him in return. He was a public figure. People would know who was responsible if something were to happen to him. Putin might hate him, but he wouldn't do anything rash, would he? Unfortunately, Boris Nemtsov had forgotten about the FSB. February 27, 2015. Boris Nemtsov was in Moscow to lead a protest against the first invasion of Ukraine.
Я патриот страны, потому что я против войны. Нет войне. Мы должны сказать, хватит маразму. Мы должны сказать, Россия и Украина без Путина.
Little did he know that he was being followed, and this wasn't even a recent thing. It turned out that FSB agents had been tailing him for over a year. The agent responsible for following Nemtsov's every move? Valery Sukharev. The agent used an FSB tracking software to see exactly where and when Nemtsov bought tickets for any sort of public transportation. When Nemtsov booked a trip, Valery would be sure to arrive at the same location at the same time and dates. Valery had followed Nemtsov to Moscow for the protest. He had people following Nemtsov all the way to right outside the Kremlin as he walked with a friend. And that's when it happened. At 11:31 p.m., a man stepped out of the shadows and fired 6 shots into Nemtsov's chest. He died immediately.
Господин Немцов совместно со своей знакомой прогуливался по Большому каменному мосту от собора Василия Блаженного в сторону Болотной площади. Неожиданно из белой машины неизвестные произвели несколько выстрелов в его сторону. 4 пули, которые попали ему в спину, причинили ему ранения, несовместимые с жизнью, в результате чего он погиб.
Coincidentally, most of the cameras on the bridge where he was shot were turned off for maintenance. Unlike other Russian intelligence agencies, the FSB doesn't need to move in the shadows. If they want to get rid of someone, they don't need to make it look like an accident. They don't even need to hide their faces, because they're on their home turf. Why hide your face if you can just turn off the CCTV cameras? And even if they're identified, who's gonna arrest them? The FSB? In Russia, FSB agents are all powerful. For years, they were a contained threat. They only operated in Russia. But today, the agency has expanded its operations internationally, and ever since, the world has gotten a whole lot more dangerous. Just because the FSB doesn't need to hide their assassinations, doesn't mean they don't like to get a little creative every now and then. Remember Valery Sukarev, the agent who followed Boris Nemtsov? Well, he was actually involved in 2 other assassination attempts before Nemtsov, every time the target was one of Putin's opponents. Alexei Navalny was one of these critics, and he announced his plan to run for president in 2017. Almost immediately, an FSB team was assigned to watch him. For 3 years, they followed him pretty much everywhere, including more than 30 flights. In August 2020, 3 men followed Navalny to the Russian city of Tomsk. Their objective? Get rid of Navalny on orders from quote the highest echelons of the Kremlin, end quote. The agents chose Novichok, an insanely powerful poison, as their weapon of choice. Luckily, Navalny survived after being evacuated to Germany. And then there was the poisoning of Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko. FSB agents laced his soup with dioxin, a poisonous chemical in Agent Orange, the same Agent Orange America used in the Vietnam War. And if you think the FSB has calmed down over time, just this year they were suspected of poisoning Russian oligarch and ex-Chelsea football club owner Roman Abramovich. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Roman volunteered as a peacemaker without Putin's permission. Apparently, the Kremlin wasn't very happy with his decision. In March 2022, he and the 2 Ukrainians he met in Kiev suddenly became sick, lost their sight, and had to be evacuated to Turkey for treatment. The cause? Poisoning, most likely by FSB agents. Now that the FSB is operating internationally, I'm sure Putin's critics are gonna be a lot more careful with their soup and tea. What makes the FSB so dangerous is its access. The agency runs a program called SORM2, which basically tracks and records everyone's messages, calls, internet posts, and searches in Russia. That's how they identify activists and Putin's opposition. That's how they track their every move. Before, the FSB could only do that with Russian websites and social media, but now even Facebook and Google have to install it. This lets the FSB leak embarrassing calls Boris Nemtsov made to the public. And Alexei Navalny, a court case against him also used information that could only be collected by SORM. The officers of the FSB have unlimited access to everything someone has online or in their phone. This has allowed them to become the most powerful government agency in Russia. The FSB's position as Russia's secret police has given them unrivaled power. They have the authority to take action against anyone they see as a threat against Russia. And that doesn't just include terrorists, but politicians, businessmen, activists, anyone is fair game to the FSB. And today, the FSB has taken control of many of the biggest government branches, including the Ministry of Defense, the Interior Ministry, the General Prosecutor's Office, and more. FSB agents can even control judges and use worse tactics than the KGB could have ever imagined. When Putin wants something, the FSB provides the rationale. When Putin wanted an excuse to invade Ukraine this year, the head of the FSB was there to give his support. The combination of a dictator president and an all-powerful intelligence agency with the power to do whatever they want can only spell trouble for the rest of the world. What's up guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're new here, my name is Jake and we make documentaries on money, power, and crime just like this one for free for your viewing pleasure, so you might as well hit that subscribe button and that join button if you want even more controversial documentaries every single month that are even longer. You can follow me on Instagram at jaketrend.io. Please watch out for fake Instagram accounts of me. I'm never gonna DM you on Instagram asking for money, and that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.